Hello and welcome to this special edition of Middle East Matters on France 24. Coming up, a fine balancing act. The murderous Hamas attacks on Israel of October 7th have placed Arab nations with peace treaties with the Jewish state in the awkward position of trying to honour their commitments under those deals while they face mounting pro-Palestinian support from their people on the streets. We'll also take a closer look at the role played by mediator Qatar. While Egypt and Jordan have longer-standing peace treaties with Israel, other Arab nations, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco and Sudan, only agreed to recognise Israel in 2020 with the signing of the Abraham Accords, a series of bilateral agreements aimed at normalising relations. Saudi Arabia had been in negotiations to do so before the war, but suspended those talks as Israel began its aerial bombardment of Gaza in response to the Hamas attacks. Emerald Maxwell has more on the response to the war in those nations which have signed peace treaties with Israel.
Protests are normally banned in Egypt, but the Egyptian government approved and even helped organise pro-Palestinian demonstrations like this one in Cairo in a concession to public anger against Israel.
I'm sharing the thoughts of the Palestinians, the Egyptians, the Arabs. Basically, everyone is here for the same cause, and the whole world demonstrating their thoughts against Israel and against the occupation.
It's a sign of the fine line Egypt is walking between condemning the Israeli offensive against Gaza after Hamas's surprise attack on Israel on October 7th and maintaining its 1979 peace agreement with Israel when Egypt became the first Arab country to recognise the Jewish state. Egypt is also anxious to stop the conflict from overspilling as the only Arab state to share a border with Gaza.
Egypt affirms and reiterates its complete rejection of the forced displacement of Palestinians and their exodus to the Egyptian territories in Sinai.
Egypt shares this delicate balancing act with the 5 other Arab states to have normalised ties with Israel. Even as the list has grown in recent years, anti-Israel sentiment has remained prevalent among the people and was stoked by the deadly hospital blast in Gaza, which Hamas blamed on Israel, but Israel and Western intelligence agencies said was likely caused by a misfired Palestinian rocket. Yet Jordan said Israel bore responsibility and cancelled a planned summit with US President Joe Biden. Jordan signed a peace treaty with Israel in 1994. It also hosts more than 2 million Palestinian refugees and their descendants. Jordan's King Abdullah criticised Israel for what he called war crimes, saying the collective punishment of Palestinians had to stop.
The message the Arab world is hearing is loud and clear. Palestinians' lives matter less than Israeli ones.
In the days following the Hamas attack, Morocco, Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates initially took a more sympathetic stance with Israel, which they only established ties with in the 2020 US-brokered Abraham Accords. Morocco said it condemned attacks against civilians wherever they may be. The UAE released a statement mourning the loss of Israeli and Palestinian lives, and its president was the first Arab leader to get on the phone with the Israeli Prime Minister. But after the hospital explosion, Moroccans and Bahrainis took to the streets, and their governments, along with the United Arab Emirates, condemned what they called an Israeli attack.
For more, we're joined by Professor Gilbert Achcar from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. Thanks so much for being with us on the programme, Professor. So these countries that have signed the Abraham Accords, what can they do now? Do they have any room for manoeuvre?
Thank you. Well, it depends on which country we are talking of, because the United Arab Emirates, for instance, is not Sudan, or for that matter, even Bahrain, in the sense that in the United Arab Emirates, you have only 10% of the local population who are citizens of the Emirates and 90% of expats. So they have no, let's say, population to fear politically.
Now, is Egypt, it's seen as a key mediator between Israel and the Palestinians. Is the government there, though, using this war to boost its own position domestically, do you believe?
I don't think it's really a matter of boosting its own position. It's more a matter of really fearing the prospect of a forced displacement of Palestinians into the Sinai, that is, into Egyptian territory, and what the Palestinians are already calling a second Nakba, that is, the fact that, the population of Palestine in 1948 fled the war and was not allowed to return. And this created the problem of Palestinian refugees. So the Egyptian government doesn't want at all to be faced with a similar issue on its own territory.
Let's talk then about Saudi Arabia. It suspended normalization talks with Israel. What hope now of returning to the negotiating table?
I presume that they must be quite happy that they were cautious and did not join the Abraham Accord when Donald Trump tried to incite them to do in late 2020. The events, and we are still at the beginning, mind you. I mean, already you have over 4,000 Palestinians killed, and it's obvious that this figure will increase dramatically. This will create a very impossible situation for any Arab government wanting to, pursue this process of so-called normalization with Israel.
And finally, for now, is Israel increasingly isolated then from its regional neighbours?
Well, if what we are expecting happens, this will create an extremely tense relation between Israel and its Arab neighbors. You already have demonstrations or people demanding in a country like Egypt, for instance, or Jordan, that they sever their relations with Israel. You might see some gestures of this kind, like withdrawal of ambassadors or freezing of relations or whatever. Definitely, this is going to have huge repercussions on the Arab-Israeli relations.
Professor, we'll speak with you again in the programme. But for now, Qatar has been leading negotiations aimed at securing the release of hostages captured by Hamas. The tiny emirate has a long record of brokering such deals, but it's maintained extensive ties with militant groups and admits financing terrorism. It also hosts an office of Hamas, which is used as the main residence for its self-exiled leader.
After 2 weeks in Hamas captivity, these 2 American hostages were released on October 20th. Instrumental in ensuring their freedom, the Gulf state of Qatar.
The United States and pressed our partners to do everything they can to help us secure the release. In this particular instance, I want to thank the government of Qatar for their very important assistance.
The United States, France, and the UK have no direct links with Hamas, which they've designated a terrorist organization. So, to free their nationals being held hostage, Western powers are turning to Qatar to act as an intermediary in this conflict. The Gulf state strategy, reaching out to all sides. On October 13th, Doha welcomed the U.S. Secretary of State, who was on a whirlwind tour of the Middle East in the wake of Hamas's attack on Israel. The day after, Hamas and Iranian officials also met in the Qatari capital.
Qatar has positioned itself after the Arab Spring as a mediator and a hub for basically building networks, connecting different actors that would not be able to meet directly.
It's a careful balancing act. Qatar hosts the largest American military base in the Middle East, while just a few kilometers away sits Hamas's political office. The leaders of the Islamist militant group have been based in Doha since 2012. While Qatar has worked to position itself as a global mediator, the emirate has also been accused of financing terrorism. It also has a deal with Hamas to provide funding for its civil servants.
Our salaries are paid by the government of Qatar, and we're thankful for that.
Qatari aid also extends to Gaza's civilian population, with the government building new housing units to replace those destroyed in Israeli airstrikes. And it sent humanitarian aid to Gaza, currently under siege.
Qatar Fund have sent medical aid and food items for our brothers in Gaza.
Israel has tacitly allowed Qatar to continue letting in cash to calm Gaza. But the Jewish state's strategy has ultimately proved to be a failure.
Professor Gilbert Ashkar is still with us. Professor, why does Qatar have such leverage, and is it a credible mediator?
Well, Qatar has been the major sponsor of the Muslim Brotherhood for almost 30 years now. And as we know, the Hamas is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. And that's why it's very natural that the leadership of Hamas in exile be at Doha, in Qatar. Now, Qatar has always had this policy of hedging its bets, if you want, if you use the term for an investor here. They have relations with everybody in the region, with every kind of force, and all the antagonistic forces: Iran, Hezbollah, Israel, the United States. They hosted the most important military base of the United States in the region, as you said in your report. They had connections with the Taliban. They hosted these talks between the United States and the Taliban. They even had connections with Al-Qaeda. They could be intermediary or mediate sometimes when needed between such extreme forces and Western governments. And for that, I think Western governments believe that this is useful, Qatar tries every time possible to demonstrate this usefulness, as they did with the release of the 2 U.S. citizens.
Finally, Professor, in light of current events then, can Israel continue to normalise relations regionally without putting the Palestinian question at the centre of the debate?
No, I think this is over. It's absolutely now clear that any illusion of, normalization between quote marks between Arab states and Israel without a basic and credible settlement of the Palestinian issue is something that is impossible. And if Western governments have to learn anything, it is to learn this lesson and act upon it. Otherwise, this conflict has been spilling over into Europe and the United States itself. Remember 9/11 for now many, many years. And, it can get still much worse.
We'll leave it there, Professor. Thank you so much for your time on the programme. That was Gilbert Ashkar from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. And that is it for this special edition of Middle East Matters. Do stay with us for more world news here on France 24.
France 24. Every art form.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.